We want to look at this monster called bottom-up. It's been catching headlines both in local media and social media platforms, with many people struggling to explain it, some even mimicking it, using their own connotations to serve their own political interests, but devoid of the political perspective that, of course, personality guided. Let's look at what bottom-up really is. Bottom-up is basically a system or an ideology supported by one, political goodwill, policy and legislative mechanisms that opens up the grassroots economic part of the pyramid, thereby ensuring that more resources are generated at the low level of the grassroots as opposed to the peak of the pyramid, as is the case today in Kenya. How do you achieve that? I already mentioned the political goodwill, the policy and legislative mechanisms. For example, from a youth perspective, how does the bottom-up apply? We have government mechanisms that have been put in place to support the youth. For example, the Youth Fund. A bottom-up perspective will create a policy and a legislative framework that ensures that in access to opportunities provided under the Youth Fund and maybe AGPO, there is decentralization of the requirements so that a youth man in, let's say, Nairobi is not subjected to the same requirements as a youth man in Busia. How and why? Because in Busia, for example, where I come from, I have a parcel of land with a title deed, which I can use to secure the resources. Can the same be said of a young man in Nairobi? So we try to create policies that ensure that on the ground we have ground-specific policies and legislative mechanisms that guide the decision making as far as economic mobilization and emancipation of the people is concerned. So that we don't create this blanket perspective that only limits the privileged bourgeoisies at the top in as far as access to government and opportunities for empowerment are concerned. We try to delimit and delink the obstacles that have been the biggest impediment to economic growth. When we talk of issues like when we talk of electricity, when we do the rural electrification program, that is a situation where we are trying to open up the opportunities in the villages. By how? For example, electricity, security lights, those are security. When you put up security lights in markets, you're creating a safer zone where people can do business beyond over-reliance on the sun. When you're talking of rural electrification, we are not just talking about connecting houses and homesteads to electricity. We are talking about an electric power line that then creates an opportunity where young people can do their welding, then can put up their welding businesses and do that business. When you talk about things like education as far as bottom-up is concerned, we are talking about a situation where a pupil at Mauko Primary School, where I hail from, or Makuara Primary School, has the same opportunities as a pupil in Westlands Primary School. Other than the per head allocations, we want to see a situation where Mauko Primary School, a pupil from Mauko village going to Mauko Primary School, can also know what a swimming pool is, away from what they see in a book. So that when we have a computer laboratory in Westlands Primary, we have the same in Makuara Primary School or Buhui Primary School or Buluani or Brubukati. That is bottom-up, ensuring that you level access to opportunities. When you talk of businesses, bottom-up is all about removing the obstacles that have hindered people on the low economic part of the pyramid from accessing to opportunities. We are not just talking about the taxation. We are not just talking about the requirements at the national level. We go as low as to the to issues of the county government as far as registration and regulation of businesses are concerned. The people who suffer the most are the mamambogas. We have the hawkers, the bodas. These are the people who suffer the most. So we need to create policies that ensure that these people have a safe environment where they can do business, thrive economically, and pay taxes. We have suffered as a country because our tax bracket is very thin. How can we have 20 million voters and 5 million taxpayers? How? How will an economy grow? Why can't we convert these voters into taxpayers so that a wider tax bracket will ease the burden on the top? Once it eases the burden on the top, we have more resources collected for the country to prosper. That revolution is what will grow our country from a debt-driven economy to a self-reliant economy. That is what will grow our economy from our consumer budgeting economy to a production economy. That is what will change devolution from a political system that only devolved jobs and expenditure and turn it into an economic devolution model that then ensures that we devolve the ability to generate resources for the country. When we talk about things like security in matters of bottom-up, we want to have a system where the citizen are empowered enough at the grassroots level to a level where they coexist meaningfully. They have meaningful economic engagements, and there is enough safety for them to exist to a point where a village in Mungambwa is as safe as Muthaiga, regardless of the houses, regardless of the infrastructure. When you talk of infrastructure, it's about focusing on the grassroots. There was an attempt through government agencies like KERA, which was a very noble idea, that can now focus on connecting the grassroots so that people in the villages are interconnected enough infrastructurally so that they are able to do business, access markets, access opportunities. When we talk of bottom-up in the perspective of industrialization, every home, a majority, let me say a majority of the home, let's say in Western Kenya, the larger Western Kenya, we are talking about the lower parts of Rift Valley, we are talking about the Western, the regional Western region and Nyanza. People have cows that they milk. Why don't we think of a way of putting up dairies? The way, for example, the Murang'a government through the noble ideas of the Mwangi Wairia did. Why don't we do the same there? We have issues like when someone sells a cow, we have hides. I once asked someone, when you're selling your cow, do you put in the value, do you include the value of the hide? And they said, no, that is useless. Why don't we sensitize our people? Come together, put up an industry so that when these cows are sold, we are able to attach value to every part, including the hides, so that then we can use those hides to start shoe manufacturing industries and then put in place a deterrent to unnecessary competition by raising taxes on imported shoes so that we can create a barter and use locally provided hides that most people in the villages throw away. So this is a conversation that, devoid of political expediency, can be meaningfully molded. And already there are steps: devolution, rural electrification, free primary education, so that we create opportunities for everyone, because originally we had a system that limited opportunities. So bottom up, in a nutshell, is about opening opportunities at the grassroots. The way people at the grassroots have an opportunity to vote and make a decision, they should have the same opportunity to access economic opportunities, socio-economic empowerment opportunities, and go as far as information. Get the information at the grassroots. Put up information dissemination centers. Engage the people so that we have ideas originated from the bottom, so that we enhance representative leadership by ensuring that our people determine how they are governed. Thank you.